Live fully, die ready. Nikki Weiss, a digital thanatologist, founder of ENDevo, creator of My Final Playbook app, and host of the Digital Legacy podcast, is redefining how we approach death and legacy planning. Her mission is to normalize these essential conversations, empowering people to comfort the inevitable with clarity and confidence. Through My Final Playbook, Nikki's holistic approach guides individuals through 4 key pillars: legal, financial, physical, and digital. Her user-friendly app simplifies complex processes into actionable steps, helping people protect loved ones and preserve their digital legacy. With a background in healthcare, project management, data governance, and risk analysis, Nikki's unique expertise addresses the emotional, legal, and logistical aspects of end-of-life planning. Her compassionate guidance provides peace of mind and the freedom to live fully in the present. I'm all about that, living fully in the present, for sure.
Live fully, die ready.
Yeah, but you bring up a great point. I mean, my father recently passed away, but one of the things he did for me is he made sure I had all the information to access what I needed to access, added me to accounts, things like that. So I can understand how this could very easily have been a big mess if he hadn't done that. So what inspired you, I guess, to become a thanatologist, which I'd like for you to define for the rest of us, because this is the first time I'd heard this word, so I thought it was pretty cool. And then how did you decide to do this? What connects you to all this stuff? How did you get started?
Well, let's just start with thanatology.
Yeah.
So thanatology is the study of death and dying, bereavement. What is that legacy that we leave behind, right? So there's different branches of thanatology. There's music thanatology and the study of thanatology. People who are very involved with pastoral guidance, they also study thanatology. Now, what me personally got involved, we all have a story. I have a story. Always starts with our family.
Sure.
So my father was 42 and my mother was 50 when they both passed away.
Oh, wow.
Young, 10 years apart, both of cancer. And so needless to say, that has certainly guided my childhood into what then I stepped into. My first professional career was in actually as a hospice clinician, bedside hospice clinician. And for those that are familiar with hospice, it's a calling. It's certainly not something that you find yourself in.
That's a tough job. I just as an outsider watching all that they do, it has to be difficult long term. I mean, that's just my opinion. Watching from the outside.
Yeah, I think I'm wired for it.
Okay, well, that's good.
And I would say, I'm one of 4 children, and I would say, as the youngest of my siblings, my other siblings are not necessarily wired for it. Although I have to say, my oldest brother is an estate attorney, so he does walk people through that experience. But bedside hospice, you'll hear many people say that there's a calling, there's angels behind some of the hospice clinicians. And as I said, I just feel that I was very comfortable with that population. I was with hospice for about 7 years. And then when I turned 40, I actually wanted to make some money. And so I took on the opportunity to step into project management. And knowing I was stepping away from the hospice population, I knew I would get back to it. I didn't know how, but I had faith that one day I would. And that happened about a year and a half ago in the summer of 2023. It started, believe it or not, with my dog.
Your dog?
My dog.
Okay. All right. I have to hear this one.
And if people who know me personally, they know both my husband and I have a very long dog history. But how does dog and hospice kind of, bring it back? Well, even when I was working in hospice, I was in charge of a pet therapy program. And I ran we had our dog's visit. And then here I am 18 years later, and during COVID, I actually took on a project dog and got the dog certified as a therapy dog. But that was the first opportunity that I was now walking back into nursing homes, memory care facilities, and working with these people and watching their expression with the dog. And then I realized that I missed that. So I stepped back in. I knew, okay, I wanted to get back into this population. I wasn't sure how. And at the same time, my husband and I realized we had not looked at our wills since our children were in high school. And now they're in their 30s. Lucky for me, I have a brother who is an estate attorney, and I got a good deal. And so we started walking through this is really complicated. Because it's not just about our wills. It is power of attorney, medical advance directives. For some states now, we're looking at death with dignity laws. It's available here in the state of New Jersey. I live in Pennsylvania. It's on the docket. Medical aid in dying. So there were a lot of complicated decisions that need to be made when it comes to end-of-life planning. And so it just all started coming together. End-of-life planning, life well lived, and I've been involved with, for the last 3 years, with blockchain, AI governance, and I just felt, how can I pull this all together? It's not just being bedside, but it is how to create this comprehensive end-of-life plan, and estate planning is just one piece of it. It's also, what do you do with your body? Now with the digital piece, that's when everything kind of started popping for me. Because you mentioned your father, and I would say that, I guess we call him the lost generation, right? Or he's just at the beginning of the boomers, right? He was how old?
No, he's not a boomer. 89.
Yeah, so he's the lost generation, right? So for them, the digital aspect was really not part of his end-of-life planning process. He might have had a couple passwords.
He only got a cell phone a few years back, so I think it was mid-'80s when he finally got a cell phone.
Was it a flip phone?
Actually, I think he had a flip phone for a little while. And we had to get him a smartphone because he was on a trip once, and I think they needed the GPS feature, and he couldn't. That's my third-hand information. There may not be accurate, but my recollection was there was a need on a trip for a smartphone. I believe it was GPS, and so he finally broke down and bought. But he barely used it. I mean, honestly, compared to what most people use it as a phone, basically.
And so
pretty
we're
much.
talking
And texting, that's about it.
And we're talking about that digital footprint.
Right.
So if we compare your father's end-of-life planning and his digital footprint compared to, say, our kids, right, who are now, like, their digital footprint is just a vast ocean of data that's being aggregated.
And a lot of things are, as you know, held electronically now, whereas in the old days it was more paper oriented, right? Everything was pretty much paper. And the electronic was kind of the backup. But now it's kind of like the electronic is there, and every once in a while you download a paper copy, maybe.
But now,
or you just do an offline copy, another digital copy that's offline. But not a lot of people even do that. I know I just recently did that. I downloaded my whole Google Drive onto a separate drive, and I'm going to keep doing that and cycling it because Google's great, but what if it goes down one day? I definitely want my data.
So the conversation,
so it's like
it's complicated now, right?
Oh, yeah,
This end of life planning. So you're asking me, how did I come to the fruition? And I would say over the last year and a half, it has just been this, on just discovery of like, okay, it's just not about my will or my documentation with my estate attorney. It's now my financials, right? Did I set my beneficiaries up correctly? Where are all those insurance policies that I know are out there because I've gone from, different employers, all my retirement accounts, like everything is getting very spread out. It's not consolidated.
Right.
Where are all the passwords? So as I'm moving through this, wow, this is really complicated. And then I started asking people that one question. If you died tomorrow and your phone died with you, think about multi-factor authentication.
Right.
How much mayhem would there be? Now, for your father, maybe not so much. But for us, you and me, right? The fact
Could
that,
be.
I have an online business. You have your clients and your passwords, right? Be able to start managing that. And then let's just take it down one more generation or two. And their social media accounts, their reoccurring subscriptions. If something happened, because part of living is dying, we're all going to die.
So I've heard.
But it's still a taboo topic, right? Now, for you and your family, you've met it on head on.
Right.
Made it a mission to bring awareness to it. But for many people and cultures, this is something that is still taboo, or, coming from my Jewish background, we have an expression, don't give yourself a kinahura. It's like, don't give yourself, if you talk about it, it'll happen.
Definitely heard that. Yeah.
And that's actually very prevalent in many cultures, is that if you talk about it, then you'll make it happen. Yet if we don't talk about it and we don't plan for it, then that becomes the chaos, the mayhem, the conundrum of where are the passwords. And so over the last year or so, I've been talking to professionals in the legal, financial, physical, and digital. Now let's start opening up to what the new emerging profession or space, which is called death tech. Now we're going to get exciting.
Absolutely. So what is death tech exactly, other than I can combine it? That's not like when your phone dies, right? That's not the death of tech, I'm assuming, right? No. So can you define it for us? Like, what exactly is death tech?
Just like it's the emerging of platforms and solutions that are able to solve the digital aspects of the life we're living today. So that's
not a whole lot of words that I didn't really quite get.
Well, let me put it together for you.
Can you explain?
Yeah.
It sounded great. I'm not exactly sure what it meant.
So let me introduce you to a couple of terminologies. Okay. Digital vaults.
Oh, yeah, we do. You use that all the time in our business. Absolutely.
So now we're talking about digital vaults, but now we're talking about digital legacy vaults. Mm-hmm. So there's a company out there called Presidio. Presidio is in partnership with AARP. They are now offering these digital vaults that enable people to upload their lives and yet set certain parameters and permission sets that in case they die,
right,
their data doesn't die with them, and that they can put permission settings in there so people, beneficiaries, executors, trustees can have access. Also, let's think about our cryptocurrency. So now we're getting into our NFTs, cryptocurrencies, metaverse assets. How do we share those, especially now that we don't have necessarily the traditional financial managers like yourself, where you might be able to have access to a brokerage account. Well, right now, as of today, 2024, getting into our cryptocurrencies, our NFTs, our metaverse accounts is a little more complicated. That user experience right now on those blockchain platforms is not so easy today. Mm-hmm. So now we're getting into, well, what are those solutions that are now being developed? So that is part of that death tech conversation. For example, also, believe it or not, there are what they call bereavement bots or grief bots.
Bereavement bot?
Kurt, I mean, have you seen, Black Mirror like that? The
okay.
Black Mirror show, like the Black Mirror show, there are a couple episodes where people have passed away, and then to be able to download their consciousness, download their thoughts, their processes, their thought patterns onto a hard drive, and then somewhere along the way to be able to create. It
sounds like science fiction to me.
Only because we're Gen Xers, right?
Okay.
So, if you talk to a 20-something-year-old, they don't know what science fiction is anymore. Science fiction really is what they're living today.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of a reality check for us, right? As old timers,
right.
OGs. So death tech, right now, a lot of the funeral homes are now preparing themselves. They are equipping themselves with, we might call, they're telecasting a lot of their services, their memorial services. Well, right now, it might be on YouTube, and where you go into a funeral, into a cemetery, and now there is technology, QR codes that they're embedding onto the headstones. This is part of that death tech.
So what's on the QR code? The ceremony?
You can absolutely.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You can scan the QR code, and it'll take you to the YouTube channel where it might have shared the ceremony, but maybe tomorrow, and this technology already exists. Remember Star Wars, that first episode that we saw in 1977 when Princess Leia popped up on R2-D2?
Oh, the 3D thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty cool. The hologram kind of thing, right?
That's not so science fiction today.
Oh, no, they can do that now, right? Yeah, they can definitely do that now.
Right? There's companies out there, Replica, that is able to start creating those holographic images. So just imagine you know, Grandpa Kurt, right? And you have grandchildren and you want to start, and this technology exists today, you want to start documenting your life, for example, and telling scenarios and stories that you would love your grandchildren to know about. So even just this conversation you and I are having, well, this is digitized right now. So it's going to live somewhere. So I don't have to fast forward that far for AI to be able to come in and start scraping the internet for anything Kurt or Nikki, and then to create a Nikki bot. That I have 2 granddaughters today, so Margot and Ramona. So Margot and Ramona, maybe they're little, right?
So is this going to be a good Mickey bot, or is this going to be? This could go all kinds of directions if you're talking about AI involved now.
We can. I mean, well, you're asking about the death tech
industry. It could be a friendly one. It could be the evil one. It could be.
Are you a good witch?
Can I create mine as my best case scenario, like that I was perfect, so to speak?
And this is where
no flaws.
This is where it comes in.
Get rid of all those flaws I had, right?
So let's talk about the benevolent, right?
Okay.
The benevolent. Benevolent means that, yes, there is technology. There are companies out there that I can now document my life, to have a conversation, to answer, 1,000 questions of anything my grandchildren might want to know about me. That already exists. There are companies out there that are providing that service. Sure. And then with an AI agent that my granddaughters could go to that QR code, whether it's at the cemetery or on a website, and be able to ask Gma, hey, what was it like when you first met Pop-Pop, 25 years ago? And I could pop up either my voice or my actual image, because there's enough of my digital footprint already out there on my social media accounts, and then AI could regenerate that experience. This is all part of that death tech space that we're stepping into.
So you're saying we're going to be able to talk to our ancestors in the future?
It's already happening. It's already there. I mean, there's a lot of famous people now that are starting to curate their assets, right?
Right.
Right. I mean, Michael Jackson, they reproduce him all the in.
Well, I know they started adding, like John Wayne to commercials and things like that, and that was like a little freaky when it first happened. I remember that. You're like, I think he's not around anymore.
No.
He had him in this commercial.
But there's enough technology that they could.
That's going back a ways too. They've been doing that for a while, the commercial stuff.
Well, now to be able to do it for you and me.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So this is where, when we get into that death tech conversation, is benevolent. Will these grief bots be able to help us move through the bereavement process?
So let's get into the grief bot for a minute, because I'm thinking grief bot. I'm like, what? I'm trying to understand exactly what that means. I heard what you said. I think of grief as one thing and a bot as another thing. So I don't know how they. I mean, the bot's not grieving. Am I grieving with the? I mean, what's the basis of that whole concept exactly? To extend the person, or transfer the information into this bot, or
right?
Is that what we're doing? This is the kind of stuff that the billionaires are talking about, right? I want to live forever, kind of thing. I'm gonna learn how to move my essence into a machine that will capture all of me, so I will never die, so to speak, kind of deal.
Yep.
That's the thing we hear about. I don't know if they're actually doing it or not. I just hear that these kinds of things are going on with the people who have literally unlimited money. They're playing around with these kinds of things.
I mean, this is all part of that legacy building, right?
Right.
So when we just roll it back just a little bit, right? So it really is about our data privacy, cybersecurity. And this is where I am so passionate about, let's have this. Can we talk about pre-planning? Can we talk about, let's take very seriously our legal, financial, physical, and digital aspects of the life that we've built today.
Okay.
And when I first presented this concept of building out a My Final Playbook, at first people were like, oh, that's for the 60, 70, 80-year-olds. And I said, no, this really is for the 20, 30, and 40-year-olds. This is for people that are living their life today and so busy that they're not thinking about what if something did happen.
So I'm thinking now, if I'm doing this throughout my life, that means I can literally... in my 60s, talk to myself in my 20s and find out what I was thinking and why I did what I did.
Well, aren't you already doing that? Doesn't Facebook already provide you that look
Well, to
back?
some degree, but you're saying, I mean, I'm going to a little bit of an extreme. So you're taking all of the information, all the actions, all the decisions, all the things you did, and why you, because we all do things differently. At least, hopefully, I've grown a little, right? I'm pretty sure I do things differently now than I did in my 20s. And so that would be a very interesting concept, where a lot of times you ask yourself, well, what would your 20-year-old self, if you could go back, what would it tell you now, and what would you have done differently? Well, now it sounds like you can actually have that conversation.
With these bots, you certainly can. And that's why it's so important.
Which would be fascinating, because if you had enough data, that would be a very interesting conversation, actually.
So I just want to make sure we have enough time, right?
Oh, yeah.
So there is so from a bioethics standpoint, there is a technology that's being developed to make the determination on, you're familiar with the medical advance directives.
Absolutely, yes. Yep.
So imagine that, because now there is a population, they're called elder orphans or solo agers.
Okay.
These are people that are living their life, but they might not be married, no kids. They might not have any attachment to a specific family. So an event happens and a decision needs to be made, but there's no identified or designated medical proxy.
So you're telling me a bot can then make this decision for them with their authorization? Wow, that's interesting.
There is now, it is on the table from a bioethics standpoint, that because what the bot does is it will analyze the recipient, let's say, their digital footprint to make a determination based on the life they've lived, whether they would go ahead and end their life if they were incapacitated, or to keep their life support system going. And it would be AI that would make that determination. It's on the table. It isn't decided yet, but that's where we're heading when it comes to that death tech space.
Wow. Okay, now if I create this death tech, what'd you call it, bot? What was the bot called again? That bot, is there a name for it? For medical directive bot?
Oh, I don't know if they've named it yet.
Okay, let's say I have.
As of today?
Well, okay, so you could, so I'm thinking of it like even a mid-step, right? Let's say I'm tasked with handling that aspect of somebody's life, right?
You've been assigned as the medical proxy.
And they're in a situation, I could literally consult this bot and find out what we think that person, I could obviously override it because I'm the human being, but it would be pretty fascinating to have them input this information, their preferences, the actual loved one, into this quote bot. Then you could have a conversation with based on their personal preferences under different circumstances. And because it's likely the circumstances you're going to see are going to be at least a little bit different than maybe anything you can think of. Everything's always a little bit off. I mean, there's standard things, there's basic things, but then every situation is just a little bit different, right? And it would be kind of nice if you were the one that had to make that decision as the proxy, to almost feel like, hey, I've got confirmation from their wishes before maybe they had Alzheimer's or some kind of dementia or something where they really can't communicate that well anymore.
Data driven. I mean, that's where they're.
I would feel a lot better, especially if you're talking about end of life, whether or not you're going to, quote, pull the plug or go ahead and go through these procedures. I know just from the talking to estate planning attorneys, most professionals are on the pull the plug side of the thing, because they see people living longer that they're not they're just miserable. I mean, basically, you're just extending the body and not really extending the life. And they've just seen it too many times. So I just know that most professionals that see this on a day-to-day basis are like, look, if it's over, just let me go, right? Because I don't want to be on machines for the next 12 months, right? With really no
quality of life,
nothing really happening, or any real expectation that I'm going to recover back to a point where I'm going to be the way I was before. So, but it'd be kind of nice to have the ability to have those conversations, I think.
And to be able to have, again, data-supported decisions, data-driven decisions.
Okay.
And this is why...
this is getting out there.
But let's bring it home, right?
Sure.
So this is why it is so important to have these conversations when you are young, when you are of sound mind, when you are building a life that you want to leave that legacy behind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I do have these conversations, it's interesting how I'm having conversations with people in their 60s and 70s and older.
Right.
And I said, you know, what is your plan? And their response is, well, debt is dead. I don't care. And I just take a step back, and because they don't have that reference to their digital footprint, they don't understand where if I talk to a 20 or 30-year-old, I would say it's interesting. The 20 and 30-year-olds are way more interested in this conversation and protecting because they understand the ramifications of the information that's already out there.
Mm-hmm.
And
True.
that if they die tomorrow and their phone died with them, it's when I say that to them, it's like deer in the headlights. If I said it to a 70-year-old, they have this sort of flippant debt is dead. So it's kind of, as I said, my mission right now is really to change the conversation. And let's talk about, you've spent so much time building this life.
Right.
Making conscientious decisions. So debt is really not dead. There is a legacy behind. Oh, and by the way, let's talk about your finances. So we all know, well, for those that don't know, the only debt that dies with you is student loans.
Oh, right.
That's the only debt that dies with you. So debt is really not dead, right? So if you are making that decision on who is the executor or the trustee, who is going to manage those assets, whether they're assets or debt, that needs to be managed. It's going to go through depending on the state you live in, right? So probate versus, New Jersey versus Pennsylvania. But either way, the idea is that if you're spending so much time building your life today, why not offboard with as much intention and planning as you have while you're here? So we're back to that legal, financial, physical, digital. For those that you're leaving behind, as an estate planner or as a financial planner. So what are, for you, what are those big, where do you find the conversation with your clients gets a little sticky when it comes to end of life planning or legacy planning?
Probably the challenge is you're going to have a couple challenges. One is sometimes people don't want to have the conversation, period. Or two, they don't want to have the conversation in a way that their heirs can actually carry out their wishes, right? So they'll hold too close to the vest, like their assets, the way they're set up structurally, because, and that's one thing you work on as a planner is you want to do multi-generational planning, because in spite of what especially older generation might think, and it happens in every generation, people just don't want to talk about their finances. But if you're disabled or deceased, somebody's going to step in your shoes, and the more informed they are about your wishes and how to actually mechanically carry out those wishes, the better that transition is going to have. I mean, you talk to people about estate administrators or executives, whatever, executrixes or whatever it is, and you'll usually get two different responses. One is, oh, they had everything set up, no big deal, filed a couple things, and within a certain period of time, it was just done, right? And that's kind of my father, right? It's basically, it took care of itself.
But your father wasn't divorced?
What? He was remarried.
He was remarried.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of complexity with...
There was some complexity, but it was all taken care of. So with the exception of one item, which was we knew we had to resolve. So, but then the other one is like, what a mess, right? And, I've talked to people that thought there was wealth in the family, and, then the breadwinner passes away, and now his spouse is like living in an apartment barely making ends meet, because there was no planning. There was no planning whatsoever. And that's sad because, one, it's sad that he didn't set it up. And two, it's sad that she didn't even know that was what was going to likely happen if something were to happen to him early in his life. And these conversations are really important to strengthening, one, your relationship with your partner, first of all, because the more they understand, even if they don't want to be involved, at least if they understand kind of where we're at, it helps them to support you, even if it's a tough time.
Right.
And people kind of forget that, that majority of people will come forward and say, hey, I get it. I'll help you. It's better that I know. I don't like it, but let's figure this out together, right?
And that's why I created this My Final Playbook.
Yep.
right? To be able to talk about those legal, financial, physical, digital. So legal, it's the estate attorneys.
Sure.
The financial, it's the financial planners, it's the insurance, even taxation, right? So long-term care. We get into the physical. Funeral directors, they really, do you want to be buried or cremated? Do you want a service or not? I mean, that's $25,000, anywhere between, to have a funeral, right? There's a cost involved. You don't want to be making those arrangements when you have an event happen. You want to be able to have those before. And now the digital aspect, right? Can you somehow preserve, safeguard your digital footprint? So one example I give is you have an iPhone or an Android?
iPhone.
Do you have your legacy contacts set up?
Because you told me to.
We did. We had
this conversation.
We did. To have those legacy contacts.
Yep.
But if you don't think ahead, then that's where the chaos ensues. So
agree. So why don't you walk into okay, we've been talking about a lot of great stuff, a lot of things we need to address. So what, from your perspective, are kind of the first steps? I mean, I know the basic things that I deal with, the estate planning and all that should be done in a very systematic way, and you address all of the different assets and things that you need to take care of. But you're talking specifically more about the digital side, which our industry should be involved in and does to some extent. But I think you're drilling even further down into this because of where we're headed, and I'm learning from you about additional things I need to address with my clients, which is great. And one of those is, I mean, we do talk about that, but I mean, the fact there are tools coming out there now, which was not the case, 5 years ago, in ways that you can pre-authorize these things. Just like adding additional people to accounts in case something were to occur, especially like a memory loss, things like that. Somebody can step in and assist with the management of them if you're determined that you can no longer manage your own accounts and things like that. Those are already kind of in place because, as many people are aware, know that that's a great place for thieves to come in and pull assets out when people are cognitive decline and nobody else is there to check it. But if you add somebody to it as kind of the brake or the gatekeeper, so to speak, before the money gets transferred out, somebody else has to say okay. And some people don't realize the importance of that. I mean, for no other reason than that, you want to have somebody else involved in your accounts, because thieves are pretty smart these days. And they're very sophisticated, and there's no way to get it. Once it's out, it bounces around the world like 4 times and it's gone. And there's nothing, by the time you realize it, it's long gone. That's the problem. It's fast, very fast.
10 years ago, what was your password?
What was my password?
Right, exactly.
Probably. I don't remember.
No, but it was, right? 10 years ago, my password is my dog's name, 1, 2, 3.
I don't think I ever did that. I don't think I was ever that bad, but they were pretty basic, for sure.
Right? Yeah. And now our passwords, minimum 12 characters. They recommend 15, and that's just, we're between AI, blockchain, and soon quantum computing. The way we manage our digital assets today is going to look very different, I'm going to say, in the next 2 to 3 years.
Right. It's
just we're going to be forced to get these digital vaults, the digital password management systems. Like, these are going to be just like people are now putting the Nests and the cameras on their house and their home and the web. Like, that is just going to be part of our day-to-day way of
where
protecting.
should people start? I mean, I use password software as well. So if something were to happen to me, they would have access to the master password to actually access pretty much anything I have, regardless of whether I had a phone or not, frankly. So what would be your recommendation? Like, what steps they take to make sure they're protecting
what
their
to do
digital,
today?
what they're ready to do now?
Okay, so now, believe it or not, we're just going to bring it down to the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the 3 people in your life that you trust? If something were to happen to you, we're going to die, we're all going to die, one of 3 ways. Either we're going to die sudden and unexpected, or we'll have that terminal diagnosis or condition, or like my father-in-law who's sitting in a nursing home just, waiting in God's waiting room. Either way, who are those 3 people that you can entrust? Those are the people that you are now going to start incorporating into your, just your in case of emergency card. Like, the first thing I want to say is you want things to be today, both physical, like write it down physical, but also digital. So you need to have a duplicate system, physical and digital, to create a physical system. So for example, and with that physical system, I know we're coming up on time.
No, we're good.
3 people. Who are you going to trust? These 3 people. You're going to put them on your in case of emergency card, both your physical card and the digital card. Put it in your wallet, put it next to your car registration. But you're also going to put them in your legacy contacts. In your iPhone has a legacy contact. They're going to be, when you start filling out your power of attorney, you don't just want one person, you're going to want a primary, secondary, tertiary, right? Because life happens. These are things you're going to have to start looking at on a regular basis. Just like you go to the dentist twice a year, you're going to want to be updating your passwords anywhere between, at least twice, if not 4 times per year, right? These are things you're going to constantly be updating and making sure that the people that you trust are going to be incorporated in it. And those people you trust might be rotated around on a regular basis because life happens.
Yep. Okay. Life definitely happens. So having all those contacts in there is really important. Like you have to really think about that. And I think that's one of the main things, just in general, estate planning does. It makes you sit down and really think about who handles my medical stuff, who handles my financial stuff, who's going to handle my digital stuff. And they're not always the same person.
And it shouldn't be.
And many times it shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be.
I'm a strong believer in that, if possible, you separate medical decisions from financial decisions, because that's it can get to be a blurry line. And usually one person's better at finances and one person's better at like understanding the emotional side of somebody as well. That's just what I've found, but it doesn't necessarily always true.
And just to kind of close out, to bring it back home is that an advice is when you're assigning the POA for financial, you do want to assign it to somebody that is responsible with money, right?
Sure.
That does have an acumen to be able to have those conversations. On the other side, from the medical advance directive, who you choose as a medical proxy, believe it or not, it is not advised for a parent to give a child the medical proxy. It is better to give somebody who is less emotionally attached to that person if there needs to be a decision made. So that's a piece of advice as a thanatologist. As a thanatologist, I give to people is like, if you're going to make decisions on who that person's going to be, understand, and that takes time, what your relationship is with that person and what that relationship, the person's relationship is with death and dying. If they're not going to be comfortable to make that decision to follow your instructions to end your life, then maybe that is not the right person.
Yeah, that would be a tough decision to make for sure.
It is. It's very serious. So it's better to have these conversations, whether, like I said, cremation or burial. Like these are conversations to have now, today, while you're of sound mind, knowing that with building out your final playbook, it's not written in stone. It's a live document. It's going to change. People are going to come and go in your life. You might give it to a child who then all of a sudden marries somebody you don't really know, like, or trust. So you might have to adjust that relationship as well. So,
and that's why you need to update, because things change over time as well. So you have like a quiz that people can take, right? That's my understanding.
Preparedness score.
So what does that do? It's at what? finalplaybook.com/quiz, right? So if somebody go in and take this quiz, what might they learn about themselves or what they need to do?
We'll go through questions on the legal, financial, physical, and digital, and to see how prepared you really are if something were to happen to you tomorrow.
Okay.
You will get a score, and then your
What
preparedness
if I fail?
score.
What do I do now?
Well, there's no failure, Kurt. We don't fail. We have an opportunity for improvement.
Oh, it's not. Oh, my teacher never described it to me that way. Oh, guess what? You have an opportunity for improvement.
It's a learning opportunity. And there's also, again, all of this is based on your beliefs, right?
Okay, sure.
I mean, some people choose to leave chaos behind. Like, that's their choice. They're going to leave a hoarded house. They're going to leave their finances in a mess. Like, that is, for some people, like, they want to stick it to the family or stick it to those. That's a personal choice. Other people are very particular. They want to leave everything buttoned up, well-defined, well-documented, relevant to the point. So that has really come down to the belief of, how do you want to leave things behind?
Well, I mean, you bring up a good point, because sometimes people that don't want to discuss things feel like they're doing their family a favor by not bringing up their own death, when in fact, they're doing them a disservice because they're not telling them what they want and how they want things done. And that was a blessing that my father was very clear about his whole life. We knew decades ago what his plan was.
Wow.
Exactly what he was going to do, even when he remarried and things like that. We knew exactly what his feeling was about legacy and about how his assets were to transfer. And so that was kind of nice, and it was, in retrospect. And this was somebody who, when I was growing up, never talked about finances. So to see that kind of change over the years where he got very, very specific about exactly what he wanted to have happen, and everybody knew.
Right, but if he had died 20 years before.
Well, it would have been it would have been more than that probably.
Okay.
But I mean, when I was young. So I think when we became adults and we became our own, on our own, my brother and I. So that's the point where he became much more willing to talk to us. I guess because we were adults, apparently.
Right.
I don't think it was anything really particular other than that was just the time.
Well,
and that was pretty forward thinking for his generation, frankly. So, I mean, I have to say, I give him credit for that.
And again, some people are wired to have those conversations.
Yeah.
I have one of my brothers is not so wired to have this conversation, and he doesn't necessarily have a comprehensive end of life plan, even knowing that we both share a brother who's an estate attorney and would do it for a discounted price. And so I asked him, I said, Barry, I said, why don't you have this plan? Or what would it take for you to put the plan in place?
Right.
And his response to me was, when I have a diagnosis. I said, well, both our parents died at a young age. Diagnosis, it's too late then.
Right.
Then you're in the diagnosis.
And honestly, that's what I found is, and I don't know the answer. I wish I knew the answer to this one, but I found most people get very serious about this when they see somebody they're close to, whether it's a friend or, somebody close in the family. When they kind of see this process happen once, they're like, I want to fix this because I don't want a big mess. Because until it actually hits you like that, but I've never found a good way to explain that to younger people who haven't seen it necessarily yet. I wish I had an answer because everybody's a little bit different. And you can talk about it, and bring it up until you're blue in the face. But until they kind of see something occur.
Talk to them about their phone. Talk to them about their social media accounts. Talk to them about their reoccurring subscriptions. Those things.
What if you lost your access to your Instagram account for 24 hours? What would that do to you?
But that will evoke emotion and cause, that will
I guess that's
allow
true.
them
I
to
hadn't
take
thought of that.
action.
See, for me, it'd be like, whatever. I wouldn't care too much.
Generational difference. It is. It's to me, it is the conversation around this. Look, I've been in hospice for over 30 years, and the hospice needle hasn't moved. People are still coming in. It's 6 months or less, and people are still coming in 6 days, 6 weeks. They're not. It is the digital piece that is allowing us to start to have. It's the reason you and I are sitting here today. If it wasn't for this digital component, it probably wouldn't be as relevant as it is today.
Yeah, it used to be pretty easy. You would, you could access things directly if you had to through your authority as the executor of the estate and things like that. But now you literally have something that's encrypted to the point where the police have trouble getting into it, right? So you have to really think about that. The encryption is getting better and better and better, but you're also locking out people that you may want to have access to it. So you better plan ahead so the right people have access at the right time.
Right.
And so what is your solution to allaying the fears of the people like, well, if I give my my 3 favorite people access to this, what's to say I don't go away for the weekend and I come back and
that's where
and they've done things I'm not really too happy about.
That's where these digital vaults come in. Right?
So I just let's allay their fears. I want you to go ahead and walk through that. What's to help with that?
Well, certainly the conversation, right? Okay. So certainly having that sit-down conversation that, hey, I am thinking about this. I am planning. I do have the technology, right? These platforms like a Presidio that allows me to go in and assign certain permission settings and timing on those permission settings based on my wishes. And those,
so there has to be a triggering event for them to actually have access to this?
Correct.
Okay.
Also, let's talk about the physical piece, right? So now there are medical advance directives that are now available online. So people can go ahead and put their wishes online and then, again, be able to provide those permission sets based on the assignment of the decision maker.
Okay.
And that can be swapped out as needed. I know that, pre-planning for funeral homes, that's becoming a big thing right now, is that people want to know that they have. Here's the bottom line: when you don't plan and there is chaos ensued, it's time, money, and emotions that is going to be spent at the end.
True. Well, this has been actually very awesome. Close, near and dear to my heart, so to speak, in many levels, personal as well as professional. And I appreciate you very much for coming on and helping us out. You've been listening to Master Your Finances.